Since I saw 19 movies at the Cannes Film Festival, I feel like I kind of have an inside scoop on the top 10 biggest contenders for the Oscar this year. So let me tell you who I think is going to take home the gold. This film is being distributed by Amazon MGM, who has had a lot of big contenders as of late. Sound of Metal, Being the Ricardos, and American Fiction are just some of the latest ones. It's also being produced by Plan B Entertainment, which is the production studio behind films like Moonlight, Minari, Women Talking, and many more big Oscar contenders. It is about this school in Florida in the 1960s that abused children of color. One of the leads of this film is Aujani Ellis-Taylor. This just looks like a really impactful and powerful film that will be absolutely emotionally gripping to audiences, and I expect to see it as a big contender come the Oscars. At number 9, we have Edward Berger's follow-up to All Quiet on the Western Front. Now, in my previous Oscar predictions, I had this a lot higher up. I'm not lower on this film, I'm just higher on a lot of other films. Like I said, the director is Edward Berger. He did All Quiet on the Western Front, which was really successful a couple years ago at the Oscars. And this film looks to be really interesting. It stars Ray Fiennes and Stanley Tucci. It is this 72-hour film, or it takes place in 72 hours, where it's all these cardinals selecting a new pope. It's supposed to have this political thriller type of feel, you know, with that ticking clock going for this film. I just expect it to be really interesting. It's also being distributed by Focus Features on November 1st, which is really a prime spot for an Oscar film. Focus Features has had 3 really big contenders: The Holdovers, Tar, and Belfast, so I expect this to be their big contender for the year. Sadly, I didn't really get the chance to see this film, but I know a lot about it, and also, this isn't even our only neon film on this list, so stay tuned for the other one. Anyways, the reason why I think this is going to be a really big contender is the story. Not only the story of the film, but the story of the director and the actors of this film. Currently, the actors are stuck in Iran and being investigated by the government, while the director had an 8-year prison sentence, escaped Iran to premiere the film at Cannes, and now looks to be going back to Iran to serve that 8-year prison sentence. This film is the reason why all that is happening, because this film investigates the abuse and prejudice against women in Iran, specifically that moment a few years ago when a woman was brutally murdered by the police because she wasn't wearing her hijab. And this is just a very risky film. The kind of film that Iran's obviously not going to submit as their nominee for Best International Feature, but the kind of film that, because of the story behind it, the story of the film, the story of the director, the story of the actors, could get a lot of attention at the Oscars. Now, Joker 2 is gonna be kind of interesting because it's a sequel, so it seems like that means it would have a harder time doing well at the Oscars than the original Joker. But the original Joker was such a success, while also really riding on the pigtails of King of Comedy and Taxi Driver. This second installment seems to be a lot more original and risky in its art form. Not to mention that it's gonna kind of be a musical. So I think that that could be really appealing to the Oscars. Also, Lady Gaga, I bet, is gonna give an amazing performance, and she seems to be a bit of an Oscar darling. So don't be surprised if she gets a nomination for this film. I expect it to do really well. I mean, look at the trailer. It's a stunning looking movie. This is the newest Steve McQueen film being distributed by Apple. It stars Saoirse Ronan and Harris Dickinson and takes place during either World War I or World War II, I'm not entirely sure, while London is being bombed. And this is from the civilian perspective. The Oscars have really been eating up some of these World War films. Last year you had the tumultuous success of Oppenheimer. Previous year you had All Quiet on the Western Front. And this is giving you a whole new perspective, that civilian point of view, like I was just saying. So I expect it to do pretty well, not to mention that Saoirse Ronan has had so much success at the Oscars. And even though Steve McQueen hasn't really done too well ever since 12 Years a Slave, this could be his film that really catapults him back to the Oscar spotlight. This might seem a little too high and I might be completely clouded by my personal excitement for this film, but at number 5 this is going to be Luca Guadagnino's second film of the year, with the same writer, cinematographer, and editor as Challengers. It stars Daniel Craig as this war veteran who is suffering through heroin withdrawal and pursuing a younger man. This is a 3-hour movie at the moment, and yes, it will probably be getting cut down a little more, but that just makes me so excited. This is going to be just such a film rich with just so much. You know, the attention to detail in a film like Challengers was incredible, and I expect this film to have that same level of attention to detail. And I also expect that Queer will get a lot of goodwill from Challengers, because Challengers is just such a hit and such an amazing film. And if Queer somehow doesn't come out this year, then I expect Challengers to end up becoming a bit of an Oscar contender. But if Queer does come out this year, then I expect it to sort of be running as its own film with goodwill from Challengers. I love this film so much, and if I could put it any higher on this list, I would, but I can't bring myself to put Emilia Perez above number 4, so here we are. And call me biased because this was my favorite film at the Cannes Film Festival, but I don't care because I really see a lot of Oscar potential in this film. Just hear me out for a second. This movie is about the head of a drug cartel transitioning to being a woman and then trying to reconnect with her family afterwards. It asks this really strong question and tries to leave it open-ended as to whether or not transitioning can actually change who you are, or if you're still the same person. And I find that theme to just be really impactful and interesting, and I really can't wait to dive back into it again when this film does eventually hit Netflix. I also expect this to be Netflix's biggest Oscar push. The other option is The Piano Lesson, directed by Malcolm Washington, but I really think because he's a first-time director and just other factors like that, for that film to not be as big of a contender as something like Emilia Perez. Also, Emilia Perez is this original musical that really embraces the musical aspect to the max. Whether you like it or not, it does not care. This also has a chance to be France's submission for Best International Feature because of the director, Jacques Audiard. Also, not to mention that the star, Carla Sofia Gascon, is incredible in this movie. I really expect her to become a star after this film. I expect her to at least get nominated for Best Actress, but honestly, I wouldn't be too surprised if she ended up winning. Also, Zoe Saldana and Selena Gomez, Best Supporting Actress for both of them, I think is in the cards, especially nominations, but really Zoe Saldana in particular, I think just is so captivating in this film, and at some points does kind of act as the lead of this movie. I know one key argument against this film has been that it only won the 3rd place prize at Cannes, but it did also win Best Actress. It was the only film to win 2 major awards at the festival, which is something that rarely happens ever at Cannes in the first place. So I just think that that's a big achievement on its own that not enough people are recognizing. I think that this should just be completely self-explanatory. If you don't understand why this movie is here, you're living under a rock and need to go and watch this movie or watch it again. This is probably the best blockbuster of the century, or at least the best blockbuster since the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I mean, it's just so good, and will definitely be getting tons of nominations. It's gonna sweep the technical categories. It's gonna do really well. So that's why it's here. And the reason why I have it this high is just because of all the buzz. TIFF, South by Southwest, all the other festivals it's played at, people have adored this movie. It comes out in July, which I think is really interesting as well. Even though it seems to be A24's big Oscar push, they are giving it a summer release rather than an October or November release. So my one question is whether or not this film will have enough buzz to be sustained until March when the Oscars come around. But if it does, if it really is that big of a crowd pleaser, if Colman Domingo is that incredible in this movie, then yeah, I totally expect this film's buzz to be sustained until the Oscars and for it to potentially do really well. Not to mention that this is a film kind of about acting. You know, it's about these prisoners coming together and putting on a Shakespeare play in prison. You know, and last year we saw a lot of films having to do with writers do really well. So now this is a film addressing a different aspect of the film industry in a unique way. So I expect it to just be a really incredible movie. I can't wait to watch it, and I can't wait to see how well it eventually does do at the Oscars and other awards. Before we get to the end, I just want to address a few honorable mentions I have. I mentioned The Piano Lesson earlier, but that's definitely an honorable mention. A Real Pain, Here, The End, and finally, Juror Number 2. And now for our number 1. Call me crazy to have a comedy about a sex worker at number 1, but it did win the Palme d'Or. And honestly, I just feel really uncomfortable with putting any movie at number 1. I just don't feel too confident in any of them, but I feel the least uncomfortable with Anora because of that Palme d'Or, because the Oscars have been taking the Palme d'Or winner a lot more seriously these past few years. Anatomy was a big contender, Triangle of Sadness was a big contender, Parasite dominated the Oscars, but now here we have an American movie that won the Palme. How is that going to impact an award show that already prioritizes American films and has a bias towards them? I expect it to have a huge impact. And also, this film is just kind of incredible. It's so heartwarming, but also heartbreaking at the same time. It's really moving, you know? And Mikey Madison is so good. She's an absolute superstar in this film. Definitely should be getting a Best Actress nomination. Could contend to win it, but I don't know. We'll see about that one. Sean Baker, also Best Director, Best Screenplay. I think those are totally up there for him. I mean, he just captures these small, minuscule moments like I've seen no other director be able to do and make them so impactful, but captivating at the same time. He's really just such a fascinating director, and I can't wait to just watch through his entire filmography. It would be a huge help to this channel if you liked and subscribed, and commented down below to let me know who you think are going to be big contenders at this year's Oscars. Are there any movies that I missed that you think could be huge contenders? Or do I have any takes that you just think are completely stupid? Tell me why. I'll see you all in the next one. Take care.